All attendees will be in a listen-only mode for this webinar. Please submit any questions through the question dialog box. We will attempt to answer questions as we go and time is permitting. Welcome to the 24-25 Standard Plans Update. This is the Designs Office Annual Standard Plans Update training. This training will cover some of the bigger revisions and additions made from the FY 2024-2025 Standard Plans for Road and Bridge Construction, which was released on October 30th. Rick Jenkins is a State Standard Plans Engineer in Roadway Design Office. Rick started with the Roadway Design Office in 2013, has over 20 years of experience in the roadway engineering field. We also have a panelist joining us this morning: Shay Gibbs, Richard Stepp, Victor Johnson, Joshua Turley. Thank you for joining us today, and I'll pass the webinar over to Rick.
Thank you, Shauna, and good morning, everyone. I'm excited to present another edition of the Standard Plans Update training. My name is Rick Jenkins. I'm the State Standard Plans Engineer. This is the Standard Plans Update training for the 2024-2025 Standard Plans for Road and Bridge Construction. For those of you that may not be familiar with this presentation, we will use this time to go over some of the more crucial updates to standard plans. If you have any questions or comments during our presentation, you're welcome to post them in the chat. We will monitor those questions as they come in and do our best to respond. We also plan to prepare a comments and response package based on these questions and send to everyone who registered for the presentation. This is the agenda of what we will cover today. I will begin with an overview of our new website and a process change to our reviews. Then I will go through some of the indexes that were updated this cycle in more detail. We have 4 other presenters today who will cover various changes to the standard plans as well. Shay Gibbs will cover a few updates that were spearheaded by our office. Richard Stepp will go over some revisions related to lighting and roadside safety. Victor Johnson will cover the major additions to the Standard Plans Index 695001 traffic monitoring site. And finally, Josh Turley will cover some of the structures and bridge-related updates. I would like to take some time and briefly highlight our new and improved website. Darren Martin from our section has put in a lot of work recently to get the new web design completed and ready to go live to the world. Here you can see the new Roadway Design Office website. And for those of you who may not know, since our last update training, Derwit Shepard has taken over as the State Roadway Design Engineer. Here you can see the sections that are located within the Roadway Design Office. Our office is made up of 4 sections: the Standard Plan section, the Roadway Criteria section, Drainage Design, and Quality Assurance, which also includes pavement design. I will focus mainly on the Standard Plan section of the website, as this is the Standard Plans Update training. Here's our main page. We have all the same information from before, just looks a little different. Here you can see our Review and Response tab. I would like to mention specifically for FDOT employees who submit revision requests, we are implementing a new revision process this upcoming cycle. Instead of emailing me an origination form and red lines, you will use this link to submit any revision request. Do note that you must have an active FDOT email address to submit a change. This will allow for an easier transition to review packages and even help with comments and responses. Speaking of comments and responses, the best place to stay up to date on what indexes are being proposed for updates and revisions, and to see where we are in the review process, is on the Track the Status of Revisions page. The page is important for our review process. We take comments that are submitted through our review process and prepare comments and response forms that are posted here. These forms show the comment, the commenter, our response, and if any change in the index is needed due to the comment, it's also shown here. Once everything is reviewed and FHWA has reviewed and approved the index change, the final index will be posted here. Now let's look at our new standard plans book. We still have a direct link to the current book here. Or you can go to the list that has all of the standard plans listed. Here you can see the release bulletin, the effective date for each book, and links to any interims for each cycle. Okay, here is our new book. We did not add any new indexes this cycle, but we did make a number of revisions. This page looks the same as previous years, so it should not be any different for experienced users. Let's take a quick look at the revision log. This shows all the changes that were listed on the Track to Status page, but with a sheet-by-sheet description. To me, this is the best place to look and see if a revision was made to an index during the cycle. My favorite revision to the website is the staff directory. We have a direct link here that takes you to a page with the standard plan section staff. I'd like to quickly go over our standard plan staff with you. As I mentioned before, I am the state standard plans engineer. My former position is the standard plans publication engineer. That position is currently vacant and advertised on our website. Richard Stepp is our senior standard plans engineer. Richard is a statewide expert on lighting issues. He also covers fencing and all of our roadside safety topics, including roadside barriers. Richard has been a big help to me with working through a vacant standard plans publication engineer position and the additional work it requires. James McGinnis is a standard plans engineer in our group. He is responsible for temporary traffic control and recently has taken over as our office's expert for roundabouts and other alternative intersections. Shay Gibbs is the newest member to our group. Her title is Standard Plan Specialist, and she helps with the publication process, quality control for all of the revisions to the book, and is responsible for the development of our new submittal and review process. She has been a great addition to our group. Darren Martin is the longest running member of our group. He is also a standard plan specialist who is responsible for all of our CAD related issues. He is the person who physically publishes the book every year. As I mentioned before, Darren is our web author and is responsible for all updates to the website, including developing our new website. He helps maintain the Roadway Design Office's website, as well as helping out with other websites in the Office of Design. Now I would like to go over some of the revisions that were made to the standard plans indexes this cycle. The first index that I will cover is 700-010, single column ground signs. The change here was to change the minimum driven post hole diameter from 8 inches to 12 inches minimum. We also added the new note 2 to allow for a square option. This change was requested by the District 7 operations, and it was coordinated with our central office maintenance and construction offices. The 8-inch hole does not allow adequate space to remove old columns for replacement. Industry requested that a square hole option be added as well, so we added the new note 2. And here is the new sheet 5 with the updated driven post and the new note 2 allowing for the square option. The next index I would like to cover is Enhanced Highway Signing Assemblies, Index 700-120. There were a few edits made to this index, but I will start here on the new sheet 3. This is something that the districts have requested me to add for a while now. There are times when the standard foundation shown in the indexes isn't practical because of limited space available. In those cases, the engineers were required to do a site-specific design to allow for a foundation that didn't impact the surroundings, for example, underground utilities. So we worked with some of the districts, Josh Turley in our structures office, and staff at the Traffic Engineering Research Lab, or TURL, to come up with an option that we could add to the standard plans. This option should only be used when called for in the plans in cases of need. One note I would like to make clear is that the base location can be shifted on the spread footing. We know that this location does need to vary to help avoid conflicts. The only limitation is it must be at least 1 3/8 inches from the edge of the footing. Notes were added to the standard plan indexes 646-001, aluminum post and pedestal mounted pedestrian detector and signals, and to 654-001, rectangular rapid flashing beacon assembly, to allow for the use of this spread footing design in those applications. Next, in the same index, I want to spotlight 3 new enhanced sign assemblies that were added. Durwood Shepherd has been working with other offices as part of the Railroad Safety Task Team to come up with ideas to help make railroad crossings safer. One item we came up with that is fairly simple is taking these 3 sign assemblies and enhancing them. The first one shown here on sheet 12 of 15 in index 700-120 takes the railroad crossing warning sign and adds the flashing beacon to the top to make the sign more visible. This next slide has another new sign assembly in Standard Plans Index 700-120. This is the new roadside sign assembly 10, and it is just the typical do not stop on tracks sign that is used frequently, but as a highlighted sign. The flashing highlights around the sign will hopefully help get the driver's attention as they approach the railroad tracks. Here on sheet 14 of Standard Plans Index 700-120, roadside sign assembly 11 is the last new enhanced assembly that was added this cycle. It is basically just the standard railroad crossing sign assembly with either a stop sign or yield sign depending on the crossing. But with this assembly, the stop or yield sign will be highlighted to make it more visible and hopefully help make the approaching vehicles aware of the upcoming railroad crossing. Okay, I have one more index I would like to cover before turning it over to the other presenters. This is Standard Plans Index 711-003, Interchange Markings. We recently made a number of changes to this index to add the chevrons at the interchanges. When making those revisions, we added 18-inch white diagonal pavement markings along the main line shoulder approaching the gore on entrance ramps as seen in the left corner of these exhibits. After further coordination with the Traffic Engineering and Operations Office, the 18-inch white diagonal pavement markings along the mainline shoulder approaching the gore on entrance ramps are being deleted as they are not shown or required in the AASHTO Green Book. Therefore, we deleted the 18-inch white diagonal pavement markings and label along the main line shoulder approaching the gore in both the taper type entrance and the parallel type entrance. We made this revision to all entrance details, including the details on sheet 2. They will remain on exit ramps. We are only deleting from the entrance ramps. Here you can see the updated sheet 1 with the 18-inch diagonal pavement markings deleted. Well, that completes the topics that I wanted to cover and discuss with you all today. As you are aware, we will not be able to cover all the edits that were made to the standard plans this cycle. So I recommend that you please check out our webpage and the resources we have available to see everything that was changed. Feel free to continue to submit your questions to the chat, and we will try to get to all of them today. If we don't get to your question, we will make sure to include it in the comments and responses that will be available to everyone who registered for this update training. You're also welcome to email me or any of the presenters directly if you have any other questions. Like I mentioned earlier, Shay, Richard, Victor, and Josh will cover some other standard plans index updates. Shay is up next and will go over a few edits that we worked through this year. Thank you.
Thank you, Rick. Hello, my name is Shay Gibbs. I am a standard plan specialist in the roadway design office, and I'm going to show you a few more updates to our standard plans. The first update is a large update to multiple indexes regarding the wording of geotextile. The change was covered across 16 different indexes that you can see listed out here. These changes were requested by Dino Jameson in the State Materials Office and were coordinated with Larry Jones, the Materials Lab, and the Structures Design Office. These changes included updating all references from the term filter fabric to the term geotextile, which is a more proper name. The term filter fabric can be implied as having a main purpose of filtering. Geotextile has multiple engineering properties that are more than just filtering and can be woven, woven monofilament, or non-woven. Geotextile falls under the geosynthetic umbrella that is referenced in specification 985. In addition to changing the term in the standard plans, we also updated references pointing to specification 985 to instead point to specification 514. In the July 2022 SSRBC workbook, construction requirements for the contractor for geosynthetic materials from specification 985 were removed due to the construction requirements not belonging in Division 3 of the specifications, as that division is designated for producer requirements. Instead of applying specific requirements to each individual specification that references 985 in Division 2, Specification 514 has been modified to cover geosynthetics used for drainage applications, construction requirements, and material acceptance. Specification 514 covers the reinforcement applications and erosion control, which has specific requirements in various areas of Division 2. Specification 514 also ensures that the contractor obtains geosynthetic product from a manufacturer that meets Specification 985 requirements. To be clear, Specification 514 essentially does reference Specification 985 to meet the materials requirement. However, Specification 985 covers manufacturer and producer requirements, and Specification 514 has now been modified to cover contractor requirements. I will now show a selection of these indexes to give an idea of this update. This first example is Sheet 4 in Index 102.110 that covers Type K temporary concrete barriers. You can see that the note has been updated to take out the word fabric and leave it as just geotextile. The geotextile has been specified, and the specification that was referenced before, Specification 985, is now Specification 514. This next one is similar. This is Index 425001 Sheet 3, which covers supplementary details for drainage structures. On this index, you can see we've updated a callout in the title to say geotextile instead of filter fabric. We've also added a note to clarify the type of geotextile. Index 430012 now has a note on Sheet 1 to specify which geotextile to use and references Specification 514 for the requirements. My last example is Index 440001 for underdrain. Same as before, the notes and callouts have been updated to the new wording and specification. The next updates are to Index 676010, Cabinet Installation Details, and 700-101, Typical Sections for Placement of Single and Multi-Column Signs. On Sheet 1 of Index 676010, we have deleted the existing controller cabinet elevation. The deletion of the existing controller cabinet elevation and notes was requested by the TURL due to the requirements referenced in the notes being removed, and the requirements for retrofitting cabinets varying based on agency needs. And here is the updated Sheet 1 with the existing controller cabinet detail deleted. On Sheet 2, we have updated the metal pole cabinet bracket to match the concrete pole cabinet bracket with an ITS cabinet. This was also requested by the Traffic Engineering Research Lab. Here is the updated Sheet 2 with the metal pole cabinet bracket updated. We have also added a new Sheet 4, which covers ground-mounted controller cabinet risers. This request came from the districts and was coordinated with the Traffic Engineering Research Lab and Structures Design Office. Some districts are installing these, and the addition to the Standard Plans Index will allow use without a special detail in every plan set. This detail is for a concrete riser only. An associated change is being made to Specification 676 regarding this revision. This new sheet includes a plan view and multiple elevation details with varying dimensions to cover the different sizes of controller cabinets. It also covers the structural components within the riser itself that have been verified through the Structures Design Office. The maximum dimensions are based on the current dimensions of the largest cabinet found in the APL. The maximum height of the riser is 4 foot 6 inches, which was calculated for the maximum height of a cabinet at 5 foot 8 inches tall. We want to note that the police panel should be located at the bottom of the cabinet, with the top of the panel being at a maximum of 6 feet tall. You can see this noted in Note 6 and on the elevation view. Please also note that the concrete for the cabinet riser and the maintenance service lab is Class 4 in accordance with Specification 346. This is different from the standard maintenance service slab that is Class NS concrete seen on previous sheets. To be clear, everything on this Sheet 4 is Class 4 concrete. This last update I'm going to show is to Index 700-101, Typical Sections for Placement of Single and Multi-Column Signs. We have added a retroreflective strip to the wrong-way driving sign column Case X. This retroreflective strip is required per FDM 230.4. Also, the Manual for Uniform Traffic Control Devices specifies that it shall be placed for the full length of the support from the sign to within 2 feet above the edge of the roadway. You can now see the retroreflective strip detailed on the index. Here's the red line, and here is the updated index with the retroreflective strip shown on the Case X detail. Standard Specification 700 was also updated with this index. Thank you for listening to my updates. Next up is Richard Stepp with lighting and barrier updates.
It's appreciated. Thank you for joining us today. My name is Richard Stepp with FDOT Central Office in Tallahassee, and during this latest publication cycle, I was primarily responsible for the following updates. Index 521-001 for concrete barrier, Index 536-001 for guardrail, 639-001 for service point details, a few indexes in the 715 series for lighting, and our brand new developmental design standard D635-005, the fiber optic splice vault. And with that, we'll go ahead and get started on our standard plans for concrete barrier, where we've added a note for shoulder rocking compatibility. And so here we are taking a look at sheet number 2 for median barrier, where we have revised note 5 as shown in this blue rectangle down below here. And so previously note 5 had only allowed for minor grade separations on one side of the barrier, but we've since updated the note to handle shoulder rocking on both sides of the barrier. And so basically this note explains that the pavement surface elevation may be placed up to 3 inches below what is shown in the standard plans. And so the simplest example of what's shown in the standard plans is in the bottom left-hand corner of this sheet. You can see that the shoulder pavement's called out as this hatched area on both sides of the barrier, and the gutter line intersects the barrier at its bottom corner. And so that's basically the default setup from the standard. And now this detail here is the blown up version of that, showing what's permitted when shoulder rocking is used. And so basically, you can see that it's okay to lower this pavement up to 3 inches below the default gutter line. In general, shoulder rocking is used as a last resort when the vertical profile of a roadway is very, very flat. So in order to get the water to drain longitudinally, the shoulder pavement basically will vary up and down every 100 feet, and the drainage inlets will be placed at the low points. And so this new policy was recently added to FDM 211.4.2.1. And if you go in there and follow the profile requirements called for, it basically leads to the result that the pavement gets lowered about 3 inches. And so allowing for this 3 inches of lowering in our standard plans will accommodate that. And additionally, for the plan's content requirement regarding shoulder rocking, you could look to FDM 915.3.5.1, with further details given in the standard plans instructions for 521-001 Part J. And that just basically shows you how to place the callouts in your plan view along the gutter line of the barrier. If you were to start off by looking at the SPI for 521-001, that would get you going in the right direction. And moving on, next up we have index 536001 for guardrail, where here we've added a brand new sheet 21 for bridge trailing and transitions to rigid barrier. And this now provides designers and contractors with some new curb options. In addition, we've revised the required washer usage, and we have some new exclusions. So taking a look at sheet 1, we've revised note 4 in this blue rectangle here. And so basically washers are now optional against steel flanges, where the bolts are mounted up to the steel posts. The more recent crash tests didn't use the steel washers in those locations, and so we went ahead and made those optional to save on costs. And while that does seem like a minor thing, those costs do add up, and so that was a pretty big contractor ask. And so again, moving forward, those washers are not required. And next on this sheet, we've added a new item to the table of contents, basically new sheet 21 for trailing end transition connection to rigid barrier details with those new curb connection options that we had mentioned. And so because there's a new sheet 21, all of the other sheet numbers got incremented and all the cross references are updated throughout. Okay, so now looking at the trailing end transition connection to a rigid barrier, which is typically a bridge, we previously only showed a very basic guardrail connection with no curb connection at the ground level. And the reason for this is that the curb connection really isn't required for crash worthiness the way it is on the approach end. That said, several designers have requested curb drawings for water conveyance and just basic compatibility with curved roads. And so for that reason, we went ahead and created a brand new sheet 21 and added this reference into note 1 shown down here below. So speaking of the new sheet 21, we'll go ahead and take a look. This is the sheet showing the layouts for all the new curb connection options. Basically, we've got new trailing end options for the shoulder gutter connection, which is shown first, and the type F curb connection option shown second at the bottom. And so we'll make a note that these are similar to the approach end, but they're shorter and they have less posted panels, and that results in some cost savings. It has no nested posts or panels. And as an example, to help explain these plan views, we'll go ahead and take a look at the shoulder gutter. So here we've got the elevation on the top, and we'll focus on the plan view on the bottom, which is specific to the shoulder gutter. So you can see in the blue rectangle, we've got the parallel guardrail section, and that's basically where the face of guardrail aligns with the rigid barrier. And by parallel, we mean it follows the edge line of the traffic lane. And so that parallel section includes the alignment curb, and the section views for that are on sheet 17, just like the approach. And so that basically matches up with the face of the barrier. And then this also includes the curb transition, which is also shown on sheet 17 between sections DD and FF. And so coming off the bridge, by the time you get to section FF, that shoulder gutter shape is basically established. And then with that shoulder gutter established, we then have the tapering guardrail. So here we basically transition out of 1 to 10, and the goal is simply to get to the next parallel guardrail section which is then fully detailed for you over here on the right. And so at this point, you just basically have your guardrail typical section for shoulder gutter. And that's defined on sheet 6 of this standard plans. It's also shown in FDM 210.4 and figure 215.4.6. And so basically this aligns with the shoulder gutter shape shown in the standard plans, where it has the rigid barrier shoulder line that basically travels parallel to the road the entire way and lines up over here with the gutter. And so you just project that out, it's following the edge line of the roadway. You then have 2 feet to the curb lip, which is the front of the shoulder gutter, and 1'6" to the back of the shoulder gutter. And then as we know, the face of the guardrail is then 6 inches behind that. And so that's just your typical section that can continue on for miles or however long you need it. So now, given this new tool, what are the needs from the roadway designer? What needs to go in the roadway plan view? And so basically, like it's shown in the blue rectangle, you call out the trailing end transition station so that it aligns with the standard plans. The pan for this is currently 536-8-113. It's called trailing transition, and per the specifications, it includes that alignment curb. You then use your guardrail line and draw the guardrail coming off of this concrete barrier. You place that guardrail line at the face of the guardrail, and you just emulate what's shown in the standard plans. So we've got the dimension for the parallel guardrail. Then we know you taper the guardrail at a 1 to 10. That roughly ends up being 1, 2, 3, 4 post spacings. And then you've got your guardrail typical section established. Again, corresponding to this parallel guardrail section. And then last, you call out the shoulder gutter limits, and you can tabulate that with its own pay item. And then I'll also remind this is just the shoulder gutter version. The Type F curb version is very similar, even a little bit more simple with a shorter taper. And so you basically handle it in the same way. And so the hope here is now on the trailing end, you require even less details in the plans. And hopefully this is a help moving forward. And with that, we can shift gears and move forward to Index 639-001 for the electrical service point details. And here we've added a new taller concrete service pole option and also fine-tuned some other things. Okay, so now taking a look at Sheet 1, Detail B for the underground feed, we can see this new 16-foot service pole option. And this is requested by District 6 down in Miami-Dade County. And so that 16-foot pre-stressed concrete pole was recently added to Index 641-010, Sheet 5. The options to differentiate the poles are shown here. We've got Type P2A, which is the 12-foot version, and then we have Type P2D, which is the new 16-foot version. And so the corresponding above and below ground dimensions are given. Also, we went ahead and added some cross-reference linkage between this index number and the pre-stressed concrete pole standard that it uses, Index 641-010. So that's shown in Note 5. And then next, we remove some vertical dimensions from this detail to give a little more leeway and freedom for the districts. And then we added Note 6 to explain these device heights. So basically, this explains that the meter and the service pole disconnect heights are defined by the EOR in the plans or by the power company. And this typically follows the NEC National Electric Code. But you can see the minimum height of those devices is 4 feet. And then beyond that, the electrical engineer working with the power company can define these other heights. Particularly for the new 16-foot pole, the engineer may choose to make these 2 devices higher. And then last, again, more leeway is provided so the meter can be placed below the service disconnect if it's needed. So that's our last change. It does apply to both Detail A for aerial feed and Detail B for underground feed. Note 6 is referenced for both of these devices. And so with that, we've wrapped up the service point details. We can now move on to the Index 715 series for lighting. We've revised the access door location in the pole base, added a new precast shaft foundation option, and added some structural grout pad details for the spread footing option. And so here we'll go ahead and take a look at Index 715-001 for conventional lighting. On Sheet 1, we've updated the access door orientation. And so first, we removed the access door detail from the metal pole wiring detail down here. The issue is this detail didn't establish a clear orientation, so some might have misinterpreted that location. With that detail removed, we went ahead and labeled the pole base, and so that references the pole base call out over here in the metal pole detail. Now the metal pole detail has the orientation clearly established. We can see the light pole arm here, which faces the roadway. And so now when we draw on the access door, we know that it's basically oriented perpendicular to this arm. And so the goal is that the access door is now located on the side downstream nearest the traffic. That's the requirement. And so with the orientation clearly established, this matches the standard specifications 715-3. And the reason the access door is located on the trailing end of the traffic is basically so the workers can keep an eye on oncoming traffic when they're working inside of the access door. So that just helps to give the workers a little extra heads up in case there's an errant vehicle departing the roadway. They may have some time to get out of the way. Alright, now moving on to Index 715-002 for standard aluminum lighting. We're taking a look at Sheet 4 foundation details where a new option has been added. So here, Note 3, shown in the green rectangle, is brand new. It's basically a new option for precast foundations, which allows for these foundations to be cast a little bit more easily in the shop. So this was requested by the fabricator and it helps them out. Quoting directly from Note 3, for precast foundations, the circular cross-section shown here may be substituted with an octagon shape. So here's the circular cross-section shown in view BB. Instead of that circle, they can use an octagon so that they have some flat surfaces in their forms. And then continuing with the quote, the out-to-out distance between parallel edges of the octagon must be greater than or equal to 2 foot 6 inches. So basically the diameter of our default section is 2 foot 6 inches. And so in all locations, the octagon would be the same or larger than this default shape. And this way you still get the same performance of the foundation. And now moving on as a side note, instead of showing all these indexes individually, I just want to add that this option was also added to 715-003 for the utility conflict pole and also 700-020 for the multi-column ground sign. So in general, wherever we have these cylindrical foundations and it's possible to precast them, we went ahead and added an option to use an octagon, and then that helps to simplify the task for the fabricators. Okay, so now taking a look at our last topic in the standard aluminum lighting standard, we'll look at Sheet 5 for the spread footing foundation option. The spread footing in general is a recent add, and so we got some feedback on this regarding constructability and adding some more details to help. And so this new structural grout pad shown here in green does assist with that constructability by allowing for leveling the area directly beneath the pole. Basically, in a lot of cases, the spread footing foundation is designed to emulate the sidewalk with the same cross slope, and so the cast surface of the top of it may not be perfectly level. And so the simplest method is to cast this foundation essentially even in matching that concrete cross slope all the way across, and that really helps to avoid any surface irregularities. And then from there, they go ahead and place the structural grout pad and make sure that thing is nice and level. And so this new detail basically supplements the specification 715-3.1 process that was already in place, and it already provided grout as an option for leveling that surface. That said, placing it in the drawing certainly does help to guide the contractor, so this should be helpful. And one last thing, that grout material is defined in specification 934. All of these things are mentioned in note 9 here down below. And then next, just mentioning a minor change to note number 7. We are continually investigating costs and how to improve practicality, and so we've revised the sizes of anchors required to anchor the pole. And we're just making sure that these large washers that are called for are readily available in the industry. And then switching topics again, just to talk about the broader spread footing as an option. We had received some requests to add this as an option for the utility conflict pole. That's in 715-003. So I am just putting this out there that the spread footing compatibility with utility conflict poles is planned. That'll likely be for the next standard plan publication next year. In the meantime, some leeway can be given if you do want to call for that in your plans. If you're needing some help to justify doing that, please contact central office and we'd be happy to help you and put something in an email. Okay, so as we close out our revisions to the concrete barrier and lighting standards, this seemed a good opportunity to make a training announcement. Working with us here at FDOT, the Florida LTAP Center is hard at work producing some major trainings for some of the larger items in roadway design. So the first of these is FDOT roadside barrier design. And as you can see by the title, it's not a national training, it's focused on the way we do things here at FDOT. This training is estimated to be 12 hours long, broken up into several modules, and it really will be the most organized and comprehensive training ever developed for FDOT on this topic. So the training will start off with FDM 215, roadside safety, and it will cover the usage needs, length of need, and general requirements, among other things. It will then go over the details and requirements for the standard plans for guardrail, concrete barrier, pier protection barrier, and even the connecting crash cushions. And so the next major training in development by the Florida LTAP Center is the FDOT Basic Lighting Design Training. This training is estimated to be 9 hours, broken up into several modules. And again, this training is expected to be the most organized and thorough ever produced for FDOT on this topic. The training will start off by covering FDM 231 for lighting, including the usage needs, warranting, photometric design, voltage drop design, and the lighting design analysis report contents, among other things. The training will also cover the standard Plan 715 series, including conventional lighting and high mast lighting. Again, both trainings are in development, so no core dates have been announced. That said, both are expected for the first half of 2024. These are expected to be given as live interactive trainings one time, and then the recording of those trainings will be posted on the Florida LTAP website for anyone to view at any time. So I do encourage everyone to pay attention to the Florida LTAP website for these official training announcements. The LTAP website is located at floridaltap.org. Alternatively, it's very easy to find by searching Florida LTAP in any internet search browser. And one last thing, the Florida LTAP website does have an area to sign up for notifications by putting in your email address. Both of these trainings will be geared towards roadway designers of all experience levels. They'll begin with explanations for beginners and build their way up towards intermediate levels. But even advanced designers are expected to benefit because they can learn the latest ways we do things here at FDOT. And so basically these trainings are expected to be worthwhile for designers of all experience levels. So with that said, please be on the lookout in the first half of 2024. And last but not least, we'll take a look at our brand new developmental standard plans, D635-005, for our fiber optic splice vault. And so this whole standard was created to support the Florida Turnpike Enterprise and their fiber optic network, although it certainly may be used elsewhere. So these vaults are typically placed in medians to facilitate fiber optic access points and connections. Standardization of this option removes the need for project-specific structural designs and shop drawings, and so that should save a lot of time and effort moving forward. In order to create this standard for the Florida Turnpike Enterprise, we had reviewed project-specific design packages that were pretty lengthy. So the idea is by developing these clear details and notes to specifically explain what's needed, we should be able to avoid a lot of that work going forward. So something worth mentioning is the Structures Design Office specifically took a look at the concrete steel reinforcing design of this structure and designed it for the H20 loading, which is a substantial size truck, so we can be confident that whatever large moving equipment is used on the roadsides can be accommodated with this design. One other interesting enhancement is that this new design now uses the Type 3 manhole frame per Index 425-001, so this consistency of standard designs and matching what's currently used on many roadways should help to bring costs down. And that said, the manhole cover is basically the same as the one that's used in 425-001, except it's not a two-piece cover, it's just a single-piece cover, so the material is just continuous without any joints. And so that added weight requiring lifting should add a little bit of extra security for that fiber optic system. Looking ahead, the plan is to publish this standard with the regular standard plans for the following standard plans ebook cycle. But for now, we did want to give this a trial run as a developmental standard because that makes things a little bit easier to modify on our end. And so we're following feedback on constructability closely, and we can make updates as needed. So for this year, what's needed by the designer? Essentially, to use this in your project, you would request approval from the CO monitor per FDM 115.2.4. And so you just follow the usual process that's shown on the Developmental Standard Plans website. The reference to that FDM chapter is provided there. For the supporting specifications, the Turnpike would use the blanket modified special provisions for 635 and 996. And those are currently available through the specs on the web system. And last, the pay item is 635-4, so that's clearly labeled in the basis of estimates. But the bottom line is that if you do request usage of this developmental standard, I will guide you through this process and I'll remind you of how to obtain those specs and what pay items needed. For the most part, the approvals for these are granted very quickly. That just assumes that someone at the FTE office knows what you're doing and they're copied into the request email. So basically, this developmental standard plan is geared towards Turnpike usage. If any other district is interested, just send me an email and I'll guide you through it as well and make sure that you get what you need. And with that, my portion of this year's Standard Plans update training is completed. Once again, my name is Richard Stepp with FDOT Central Office in Tallahassee. Should you have any questions or ideas throughout the year, my contact information is located here and also on our Roadway Design Office webpage. Additionally, again, we're taking live questions in the chat box, so I'll attempt to take a look at those now and answer as many as possible during the following presentations. And that said, any questions we can't get to now, we can handle in a follow-up email to the training attendee list. So with that, coming up next, I'll now introduce to you our next presenter, Victor Johnson, coming to you from the Transportation Data and Analytics Office. Thank you for your time and attention.
Thank you and good morning. My name is Victor Johnson. I'm the Traffic Data Collection Supervisor for the Transportation Data and Analytics Office. Standard Plan Index 695-001 was updated from 15 to 20 sheets to include weigh in motion and non-motorized data collection layouts, infrastructure, and equipment requirements. Additional sheets were also provided to differentiate the continuous count station from the short-term monitoring station. All sheet titles were updated, and a table of contents was provided for the index. There will be additional updates and changes in the next iteration, taking input from the industry review. Sheet 1's illustration was updated to show the required modem antenna, managed field Ethernet switch, and patch panel. Details were moved to sheet 18 and replaced by the table of contents. Corrections were also made to the notes section. Note 1D to correct an error with the P1 receptacles identification. Note 5 was amended to be consistent with the other sheets. Notes 4 and 6 were modified, removing the statement of furnished separately for required equipment. Here's the new sheet 1. Sheet 2 amendment was to add the required modem antenna, managed field Ethernet switch, and patch panel to the illustration. Change from vehicle terminal strip to a more accurate piezo sensor terminal strip. Correction to the notes. 1D properly labels the P1 equipment cable. Notes 4 and 6 remove the furnished separately notation for required equipment. Note 5 was amended to be consistent with the other sheets. Here is the amended sheet 2. Sheet 3's illustration was modified to spell out the center conductor notation. Here's the modified sheet 3. Sheet 4 was updated to correct the second table, the P1 equipment cable plug pinout, that was previously incorrectly labeled as J1. The modified sheet 4. Sheet 5 was updated to show in both layouts both lanes of travel flow. It specifies a non-weight axle sensor for the configuration. It moves the curb and gutter detail to page 18. It updates Note 3 for the removal of splicing the loops from the document. Loops must now run the entire distance to the cabinet. Note 6 was also deleted. Here's the modified sheet 5. Sheet 6 is a new sheet for the short-term traffic monitoring layout, 4 or less lanes. No modem or antenna will be required for this setup. Here is the new sheet 6. Sheet 7 was deleted from the 695-001 as FDOT TDA is moving closer to the long-term pavement performance LTPP standard for way and motion sites. The new sheet 7 is to illustrate the short-term traffic monitoring site layouts for 5 to 8 lanes. New sheet 7, omitting the need for the managed field Ethernet switch, modem, antenna, and patch panel. Sheet 8 is a new sheet to illustrate the lane layout of the short-term data collection locations, up to 4 lanes. Here is the new sheet 8. Sheet 9 is a new sheet dedicated to the way and motion monitoring site cabinet layout. Sheet 9's illustration includes modem antenna, managed field Ethernet switch, and patch panel. Sheet 10 is a new sheet for the way and motion cabinet backplane details. The new sheet 10 illustrates the way and motion backplane details. It includes inductive loop terminals, non-weight and weight sensor terminals, along with solar power suppression and regulator. Sheet 11 was modified to remove the Type 1 Configuration A from the sheet. FDOT TDA is moving toward the long-term pavement performance setup with right and left wheel path data being collected. Sensor spacing on the illustration was also corrected from 24 to 12 feet. The new sheet 11 shows the FDOT lane layout for a weigh-in motion lane. Weight gathering sensors are in both wheel paths with an inductive loop center. The sensor spacing was also corrected on this sheet. Sheet 12 is a new sheet for the non-motorized monitoring site cabinet layout. As applications may vary, the information must be verified with the Transportation Data and Analytics Office. In Sheet 12, an illustration of the non-motorized cabinet layout is found. It includes a modem with antenna, counter, battery, and backplanes. Sheet 13 is a new sheet for the non-motorized monitoring site cabinet side and backplanes. As applications may vary, the Sheet 13 is dedicated to illustrate the non-motorized cabinet side plane for power and back plane for sensors in a typical setup. Sheet 14 is a new sheet for the non-motorized narrow path sensor configuration. The new Sheet 14 illustrates the use of non-motorized data collector and sensor installation for a narrow side path configuration. The sources are used with an infrared sensor, and the second is without the infrared sensor. Both setups provide directional data. 15 is a new sheet for the non-motorized large shared use path configuration. The new Sheet 15 illustrates the layout of the non-motorized data collection in a large shared use path configuration. The first with and the second without infrared sensors, both capturing directional data. The new Sheet 16 illustrates the non-motorized extra large shared use path configuration. The sheet illustrates the layout of the data collector and sensors with and without infrared in a large shared use path scenario. The first illustration has the infrared sensor and the second is without the infrared sensor, but both capturing directional data. The new Sheet 17 is for the non-motorized paved sidewalk configuration. The new Sheet 17 is to illustrate the layout for the non-motorized data collector and sensors without infrared in a paved sidewalk scenario. The new Sheet 18 is where we moved all the detail pages from the previous document. Details that were located in the original sheets are located to this page. Also included are instructions for installations across expansion joints. Sheet 19 was modified for the non-intrusive vehicle sensor layout to include the maintenance pad and a pull box for ground rods. Here's the new Sheet 19 with the maintenance pad and ground rod pull box. Sheet 20 was modified to include a maintenance pad and a pull box for the ground rods to both continuous and short-term traffic monitoring sites. Note 1 was modified to provide index number for the cabinet, ground rod, and maintenance slab. Labels were updated and sheet titles were amended. Here's the new Sheet 20. Thank you for your time. Here is my contact information if you have any questions or concerns. Our next presenter is Mr. Joshua Turley of the State Structure Design Office. He will cover a variety of structure and bridge related indices that were updated during the last cycle.
Hello and welcome to the 2024-2025 Structures Design Office Standard Plans Training. I'm your presenter and my name is Joshua Turley and I am the Structures Design Office Standard Plans Engineer. Today we will go through a brief overview of some of the more notable changes to the 2024-25 structure standards. There are many items not included in this presentation that can be found in the revisions prologue to the book. Many of the changes not included in today's presentation are changes made for clarity or accuracy. Today we would like to highlight changes to design or detailing that take us on a different path than what we had in the previous book. Here is a brief overview of some of the standards we'll be addressing today. We will conclude our presentation with Index 64120, the concrete CCTV pole. All right, to kick things off, we will start with the Index 45511 bearing plates, Type 1 pre-stressed Florida I-beam and AASHTO Type 2 beams. For this, we did two things. We modified the dimension L for the skew angle, and we also added a note to clarify what the negative dimension means there. On the left, you can see the dimension of the bearing pad, the width of the bearing pad L, right here in red. In the section cut, which is parallel to the beam, which cuts across this way, the dimension L, as you can see on the image in the right, is not quite right because the dimension L is not parallel with the beam. There's a skew. And so what we had to do is we actually had to add the sine theta to account for the skew there. So we corrected that. So for the second part of the changes to the standard, in the image to the left, you'll see the negative 2.5 inch dimension for type 2 beams. We've added C note 10, and note 10 says for AASHTO type 2 beams, negative dimensions indicate anchor studs are in a single line in the outside row. So normally these anchor studs are 2.5 inches beyond the countersunk screws interior to the beam. But a negative dimension means go the other direction and put these in one row in the outer row of the beam. And the reason for this is that the type 2s have such a small width that we can't fit a bunch of different rows in them, which we can do for other beams. So this is why we add note 10 to clarify what that negative dimension means, because you don't typically see a lot of negative dimensions in the standards. For Index 45531, 30-inch square pre-stressed concrete pile with high moment capacity, we've done two things. We've altered the splice detail here, and we've removed the option for corrugated steel form from the void. We removed the option for corrugated galvanized steel pipe for forming the void because we wanted to reduce the risk of corrosion and possible reduction in the lifespan of the pile. So looking closer at the splice, we moved the dowels more interior. So these dowels here, we shifted them more interior. And we did this to help prevent spalling into the void while drilling. This did reduce the number of dowels, but this is okay since most of the moment capacity comes from the collar reinforcing, which is the 36 number 8 bars on the perimeter. For Index 458-110 expansion joint system, poured joint with a backer rod, we made a modification to the joint detail here about the removal of the form material. The reason for this is that over time, as the poured joint may fail, small incompressibles such as rock and sand or whatever can become trapped in the joint. So as this area fails, incompressibles can fall in and be trapped in the joint because of this form material if it's left in place. And during thermal expansion and contraction, this can cause spalling in the bridge deck. For Index 55011, bridge fencing on parapet, we changed the title of the index. We actually did this not because of this particular standard, but because of 55013, which was called bridge fencing over railroad. We got requests to use 55013 in places not over a railroad, and though 55013 was created for use to comply with railroad requirements, there was no prohibition for using it elsewhere. So we decided to change the title to more accurately reflect their usage. The defining characteristic of this particular index was that it was on a parapet. So the new title is Bridge Fencing on Parapet Curved Top. For Index 55012, Bridge Fencing Enclosed, we got some questions about how big the enclosure, the width of the enclosure can be. What's the max dimension that the standard is designed for? So we added a maximum width to this. In addition, it was brought to our attention that some of the dimensional math was a little bit off, so we adjusted it. Here is 550.13 fence standard we were talking about. So now instead of saying bridge fencing over railroad, it says bridge fencing on barrier curved top. For index 63010 conduit details embedded, we've changed the use of schedule 80 pipe for the conduit to schedule 40. There was no reason we could find to require the schedule 80 at a higher cost, so we moved it down to schedule 40. And wrapping things up for index 64120, the concrete CCTV poles, we added a new strand pattern to help facilitate construction of the handhold. And so on sheet 1, we had to modify the tables for the updated additional strand pattern. So here on sheet 2, you can see we've added a new strand pattern, and the new pattern essentially shifts the strand so that there's clearance for the handhold to be formed on the flat of the cross section and still maintain all appropriate cover requirements. And so all these strand patterns, we just bumped them up one. 1 became 2, 2 became 3, etc. All right, and that's all we have for you today. For any questions or suggestions, you can contact me. Again, I'm Joshua Turley, the Structures Standard Plans Engineer. You can email me or call me, and any ideas, any suggestions, we're always looking for feedback and looking to improve the standards. Thank you.